Hi, Batya, and thank you very much for joining my new web series titled War Has Reset. You are in Israel, I'm
Yes.
in Europe,
Yes.
and I would like to take this opportunity to look at what is happening in the world right now. There are many wars. For us European, a very big one, important one between Russia and Ukraine. Seems there is war everywhere. And we come from two difficult years, from the pandemic into war. But perhaps for you in Israel it's different, the perception. We will deeper also about this. Many wish the pandemic was nothing more than a bad dream, a nightmare. The truth is that it is still a reality for the most of the world's population as we speak. Many wish the Russo-Ukrainian war was nothing more than a bad dream, a nightmare. According to psychoanalysis, nightmares can only disappear when the meaning is represented. Before I ask you my first question, which I asked to all my interviewees, I would like to share with you why I decided to start this new web series. Well, this web series follows my previous one, Breakfast at Küsnach and Lockdown Therapy, which I recorded at the early stages of the pandemic. And also to give a Jungian or neo Jungian perspective on what happens in life. And also because, as Andrew Samuel suggested, within the microcosm of an individual and the macrocosm of the global village, we are floated by psychological themes, and that politics embodies the psyche of a people. Andrew also said and actively demonstrated how useful and effective perspectives derived from psychotherapy might be in the formation of policy, new ways of thinking about the political process and the resolution of conflicts, especially the resolution of conflicts. We Europeans experienced in the past 2 months war as an attraction. We are attracted to eat war on a daily basis on the media. War, newspaper, from a 24/7 coverage on COVID, the media move on a 24/7 coverage on war. I call this media bulimia. News Are news outlets helpful to understand what is really going on, or are we staying on a superficial level? Um, so I would like our conversation to try to go a little bit deeper than this media bulimia. As I said, we are attracted by war. Could it be that war is in our nature, or as Freud said, aggressivity is in our nature? War for me is the opposite than Truman Capote's Vanity Fair. It is actually the atrocity fair. What is war? We are in Israel. What is war?
Well, such a heavy subject. Um, I came from a family, part of my mother, all her family is from Ukraine, and we are Holocaust survivors from the side of my mother. All my grandmother family was murdered during the Second World War in Ukraine, in Chernobyl. From my father's side, my father came from Morocco, Israel. Um, as most of the family in Israel, the brother of my father died in Six-Day War. My husband took part in all the war of Israel. And my son also was badly wounded during his military service. And now we're having grandchildren in the military service. Since my childhood, I was a teenager in Six-Day War. I was married, pregnant in Yom Kippur War, which was the worst. And I myself was in the army during never quite time, but I was in the border of Syria, and I have 2 years of a very traumatic military service myself. And you know, Lebanon, where I live in the border, near the border of the north border of Israel. Most of my grown life, I was a member of a kibbutz, also near the border. So war for us is a way of life, sorry to tell, a struggle, an everyday struggle, and a lot of pain.
Mm.
You interview me after the most meaningful week in Israel. Between the Holocaust Memorial Day and the Independence, we have a week of the Holocaust Memorial, a Memorial Day for the soldier who died in the war, and then the Independence War. This was a week ago. And I think every family in Israel carries something very heavy, very sad, and very tragic. And we carry all of us as a lot of pain, a deep pain.
Thank you for sharing this personal experience. Yeah, it's very interesting. Your family from the mother side comes from Ukraine. Ukraine, as the most of Middle Europa, was fundamentally Jewish. There would be no Middle Europa without the Jewish people. It's very interesting. Authors like Stefan Zweig or Joseph Roth, Jewish themselves, describe if you were going into Galicia in a normal town, the 80%, 90% would be Jewish, the doctor, etc. And if you had to go to a doctor, you had to go to a Jewish doctor. But then anti-Semitism stepped in. And I'm reading Yalom's book about Bloyer and Nietzsche. And
Yeah.
the Bloyer was not able to have a better career because of anti-Semitism. But I want to look, before to dive into this, at war. Is war masculine? Was war feminine? Is war both? Because from an archetypal point of view, soldiers are male. Nowadays, soldiers are also female. And you just said that your Israeli experience is something different. You were a soldier. When I visited Jerusalem 15, 20 years ago, at the end of the Third Intifada, I remember very young, not only boys, 18, 20, with a rifle, but also women. Is war male? Is war female? Svetlana Alexievich, Nobel laureate for literature, says somehow, poetically, it is male. What is your opinion?
Well, look, in August, our granddaughter is going to the army. Now we have a grandson in the army, and in a few months, another grandson is going to the army. It's very much attached to deep pain and not to whether it's masculine or feminine. This is not important at all. Of course, everyone in Israel is going to the army. Almost everyone, the very religious, are not going. So every woman and every man needs to go to the army. There's no other option. And it's part of our grown up. It's part of the way that it's a path that we need to pass. There's no other opportunity. And it becomes difficult the more you are not really in agreement with the government, which is now with the political situation. It became, as the year passed, it became really very hard to think about that our children are in the army, no matter if they are women or if they are boys or girls, and that our grandchildren are not going. It's very difficult, especially now, that for many years, the wing side of the Israeli political map, the government, and you don't agree almost with anything that they are doing. but something in our deep connection and deep identification with the land of Israel force us to do what we are doing. My mother was born because her mother was able to escape from Ukraine. If not, I wouldn't have a mother. And she escaped to Palestine. And if there is no Israel, most of us were not alive. So Israel is very important for us.
Now we'll start asking very banal questions, because this will be on YouTube and I want people to understand all the context. Yeah. And I apologize because I know they sound stupid and banal. Why your mother escaped Ukraine?
My grandmother.
Why your mother escaped Ukraine? I understand why, but I want people to hear it.
Well, you know, there was no future for her. She was a young woman. She fell in love with a non-Jewish in Chernovich, and her family was terrified from it. That my grandmother, not my mother, my grandmother, and they told her to go. And there was a yeshiva boy who came from Poland, my grandfather, and took her with him to Palestine. And you know, Jewish in Europe were in diaspora. It was not their homeland. Anti-Semitism before the Nazi were all over. You know, I'll tell you a story. I went one morning, many years ago, I think 6 or 7 years ago, I'm working with a Ukraine developing group more than 12 years. So one morning, Valentina took me to a tour.
Valentina is a colleague, for those listening, a Ukrainian colleague.
She took me to a tour, and we saw a statue, and we look at the statue, and she told me, you know, this is the creator of the Ukraine nation, Khmelnytsky. And I look, I say, you know, Valentina, every young boy in Israel and young girl know the Khmelnytsky was one of the most cruel personality, a leader to the Jewish, and the atrocity that he did was unbearable. Everyone knows. There are some, and you see both sides of history. And you see, you and me are walking here, you're telling me that this is the creator of your nation, and I'm telling you that's the reason why my grandmother has to go out of Chernovich. And you know, she never had the feeling, never. She was not able, my grandmother, to connect to the feeling that that she's a survivor. She missed her family so much. She was so lonely. She couldn't bear, she lived a very tragic life. She couldn't bear the situation that she left Chernovich at the age of 17, and she never saw any one of her family. And my grandfather the same.
Which year was that, more or less?
Chernovich.
No, which year? In which year she left?
She left at the end at 20-something. I don't remember, 20-something, in the 20 of the last century. Yes.
Interesting. So it's not connected to also the wave of like Neumann, who left Berlin for Israel because of the Nazi in Germany. You said we have to do what we have to do. What does it mean? Does it mean go to the army, send our son, daughters, grandson, and granddaughter to the army? Does it mean to defend ourselves, to defend our homeland?
Yes, that's what we have to do till now. You know, we are very sorry for it, and you know, part of us really dream about a new government, a new political situation, new horizon, that maybe peace talk. But you know, during the peace talk in Oslo, Rabin was murdered. All the leaders of the Arab country did not support most of the process. There were terror attacks, unbearable terror attacks during the peace negotiation during Oslo time. Look what is going on this month. We have such a terror attack this month. More than 4 severe terror attacks. And you know, we are helping Ukraine very much, and we are very much with them and trying to do. But I can have a group with Ukraine Tuesday evening, and at 9:30, when I'm finishing the group, I'm sitting with a patient who is in a terror attack and have a panic attack, and I need to help her. And I know that tomorrow my grandson, my granddaughter, my friend daughter, my family, children are fighting. And that's the way we live. That awful way we live, awful. Sometimes I hate it. I'm tired of it. But I don't have the privilege to be despair. We don't have this privilege. And you know, first visit in Ukraine was my first visit in 2011, I think. It was like a box to my face, because that was the first time that I realized that I have to put here that I'm Jewish. And I asked Dimitru to take me to Babi Yar. And Dimitri came with me, with his son, his grown-up son.
Platon.
Yes. No, his grown-up son. He had, yes. And we went together to Babi Yar. And that's, you know, there was I already talked about it, and I will give also a talk about it in the Buenos Aires conference. But through that visit, I was able to find a relative that survived from Second World War, and to be able to talk to him and to give my mother a very dear present to let her know what happened to her family. And that was really a miracle, really a miracle.
We will come back to Israel in a bit. Let's stay in Ukraine. What is this war about? Why Russia invaded Ukraine?
Well, you know, I have many thoughts about it. One of them is about power, which usually what war is about. Power conflict. The second one is the democratic movement that's Russia, especially if Putin represents what's going on in Russia, could not accept that they have democratic. The change in Ukraine the last 6 or 7 years is so deep and so clear. I remember coming to Ukraine, entering through the airport, and there were always a military person who asked you, how much money do you have? What are you going to use? With completely something strange. The first time I answered him, but this is my money, this is my business. I didn't know where I'm going to. And in the last 6 years or 5 years, it changed completely. All the atmosphere, the liberation, things were a little bit more open. I think for the Russia, it was completely unbearable. And especially, you know, the political movement towards NATO, towards the European Union. But deep inside, it was a spirit that the Russians could not hold. And I think this is what they are fighting for. And I think this is the reason that they are going to win. I think they are winning already, because this war means so much for them, for us also, for me also, because this is a war of liberation. This is an independence war.
Yeah.
This is so important.
Yeah, I truly believe that this war is about this liberation, especially in the Mary Watkins sense. That it's not just development, but it's really a conversation with yourself, with the other, and with God. And there is an Italian journalist writing for Corriere della Sera, which is the most important Italian newspaper, who wrote on the 7th of March. The war in Iraq, 2003, gave an important shock to Europe. In the wake of the massive street demonstration, two great European intellectuals, Jürgen Habermas and Jacques Derrida, asked themselves the question: what binds Europeans together? With respect to the international order, they answer, it's a political mentality different from the American one and based on some common traits, an aversion to the use of force, first of all, and therefore an insistence on law and respect for international legality, support for a global system based on liberal multilateral institutions and on human rights, fruit of the past inspired by opposite principles and characterized by centuries of bloody carnage. Precisely, this mentality had to push Europe to build a foreign and security policy anchored to the EU, overcoming the stupid simplistic opposition between war and peace. On top of this, I think that we Europeans didn't see the Ukrainians being part of these real of values. We saw them, as you said, too much Russian, too much Slavic, too much this, where are you going, what are you doing, what is your money for? But the Ukrainians really fought for moving not to the West because of McDonald's, BMW, or Hollywood, but actually because of these values, to be able to decide for their government, their future. And although the government, the state might be full of tension, like the USA right now, democracy survives so that you have new election and new leaders, and not getting closer to an authoritarian regime.
Well, you know, I don't know if you've been, where is the last time that you have been in Ukraine, but I was there in the revolution in 2014. It was January, February. I think I was there in the end of January. It was so cold. It was freezing. It was minus 20, minus 24. And I worked with Yuri and Dmitrio in the center of Kiev, where people were, after they were killed by their own government, and people were standing day and night in a frozen, and I looked at them and I thought, we Israeli were not able to do it. It was amazing, the spirit that was built there. It was unbelievable. And you know, the Russian developing group, the Russian Jungian analysts had a clinic, a walk-in clinic near the place where everything was happening. And you saw people were cooking on an open fire and working there and being there. It was unbelievable. And you knew that something new is coming, that something coming from the deep side of their psyche, which was there always. But you know what happened to them, what history brought to them, they were not able. But they are free people, no doubt. They are free people.
Interesting, your Jungian psychoanalytical view, you know, that something came up from the deep layers of the psyche, but you also said something. The Russian Ukrainian, or the Ukrainians of Russian language speak, were there to help in the Maidan. This is not possible now anymore. Our Ukrainian colleagues really don't want to have to deal with the Russians.
This is very hard. You know, you can understand it, but in the personal level, it is very hard. For me, it's very hard, because I've been there so many years and I have strong connection with a group that have Russian, and I think all of them are wonderful people. Although there are people who grew up in a very totalitarian regime. They cannot breathe. So all the way of being, the way it's different. It's completely different. And the Ukraine cannot suffer it now, cannot, and I understand it completely. You know, I was sorry that I took part in the email exchange, you know, that was going on to boycott, because I think it's the idea of boycott is awful. But there are certain points in everyone, in every person, that he can say, and it's very important for him to say, till here. And
to be respected.
The truth, yeah, and to tell you the truth, I don't hear the Russian now. I don't know what is happening. I don't know why they are not out there more. I don't know if you read Hannah Arendt, The Banality of Evil. But, you know, she said, which is a wonderful book, very meaningful book for me. As I was a child, was the Ahman trial was in, and I was running out of school because my mother and my grandmother were looking for the family. And, you know, 12 o'clock, we were able to sit near the radio and to listen to the trial. But she said, one morning, like the sky opened, when someone told about a Nazi officer, Anton Schmidt, that every day wake up in the morning and was able to say, I'm not going to participate in what my unit is doing. I'm going to the partisan and help them every day for 4 months. And of course, he was caught and killed and murdered by his fellow officer. But where is the courage of the Russian? Where is their courage? Why they are not there? Why we don't hear them? That is very painful also.
This is a very important point, but we have to be very careful. If I remember correctly, Hannah Arendt, she was in Jerusalem for the trial, and she was writing for the New Yorker at the time. And she was heavily, heavily attacked by Jewish, Orthodox Jewish, as almost connivance with the Nazis. Because she was saying, basically, we didn't do enough. We Jewish didn't do enough. Yeah, or...
Well, you know, she condemned all the rabbis, they gave all the paper to the German, because the Jewish community was so organized. But there was a difference between Rabbi Leo Beck from Berlin, who gave all the paper to the Nazi, and the rabbi of Saloniki, and the rabbi of Rome, who didn't cooperate with the Nazi. And, you know, the picture she said that the picture would have been completely different. Instead of 6 million, maybe 4 million, 4.5 million. And, you know, and she condemned also the Jewish who were part of the organization in
the Capo. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But for me, Hannah Arendt there started what now in Israel is called combats for peace. So these men and women that were into the army fought, and they say, we cannot go on. We have to ally with the Palestinians for a third to happen. Why do I say this? Because I try to connect with Russians. One of them, Dmitry, not Dimitro, Dmitry, opened up and decided to speak, especially on Russia's cultural complex. No one else did. Perhaps they're afraid to get a fine, because now they get a fine, they don't get arrested if they talk openly. But there is deep fear. There is a movie out now that actually won the jury prize at I don't remember if Venice of Cannes, is about the child of Nazi Germany. So those kids They were little when it started. Now they are men and women of 80, 90, maybe 100 years old. And they fight even among each other about the memory. And then one woman saying, well, we are responsible. Either we knew it, either we didn't know it, we are responsible. A colleague, Ursula Brasch, recently told me, I'm really worried for our students and colleagues who are prisoners in their own country. And this sentence touched me a lot. But then I ask, well, there is always a possibility to choose, which is hard, to leave or to, like Dimitri, open up and become a combat against your country, as you said, to speak up. Do you think, using symbolism that is very dear to Jewish and Israeli, do you think that Ukraine is a little bit like David against Goliath, where David is Ukraine and Russia?
The difference is different, and I'm happy for it. The difference is that Ukraine are getting a lot of help. And I think this is very important. And it's also very important that no one is fighting for them, because they need to do the fight, because it's their independence fight. But I'm, really humble and full of, it's make me really satisfied that people, nation and people are helping them so much. And I think we need to continue to help them and to help them to win this war. This is very important. But the Russia doesn't look, I'm not a military professional, but I don't think the Russian is such a good army as I look.
You are a retired soldier or a veteran. I'm not. I'm 44 and I didn't have to go to the army. In Europe, we don't have this anymore. But for sure, what military personnel or in the newspaper say that the Russian is a very weak army, and Ukraine is getting help from everywhere, especially Europe, especially the United States. Now there are some critics saying that the USA is fighting a proxy war in Ukraine against Russia. And I wonder whether, what else? What else? And this brings us back to First World War, when the Russian and the Austrian Empire were confronting each other. And of course, there was still Tsar Nikolai and, the Emperor, the Kaiser, Franz Joseph. But the threat in Europe was already from bourgeoisie capitalism and the Reds, as they say. And Joseph wrote, even Steffensweig described First World War, a war between the threat of communism. So better to have a war against communism that maybe is covering something else than actually being trashed by that. And Joachim Fest said this as well. After the implosion of the Soviet Union, the communist threat was always that there is really the Russian idea of a certain world and the European idea. I wonder whether this is also about, but when talking to you, thinking about David, Goliath, I cannot stop thinking of the Palestinians as well. Because perhaps in your regional conflicts, the Israeli and the right-wing government of the Israelis have become like Goliath, and the Palestinians like David. You have an amazing defense force, the shield against the rockets, and the Palestinian desperate are throwing, sorry, my language, but shitty rockets. This is desperate, and I would like to have an inside view because,
well, this conflict is unbearable. Of course, because what happened to the Palestinian, what happened in Gaza Strip is, you cannot think about it, that everything is closed.
Still happening too.
Yes, that's unbearable. And what happened in the West Bank, between the settler and the Palestinian population, this is unbearable happening. But you know what? The leader of both sides are to be blamed for it, of both sides.
Yeah.
And not only our leader. Of course, our leader has a lot to do with what is going on. Of course, especially Netanyahu. But also their leader, Arafat, all of the leaders, where there was an opportunity, I think a real opportunity in Barak time and in Olmert time, but their leader didn't do anything. This is a shame. Now, it's first time in Israel, we have an Arab party in the government, Mansour Abbas, which is a wonderful person. But I think in a month or two, Netanyahu would come back. And, you know, this is a huge complex in the Jewish complex. But everyone is looking for security here and for power in Israel. This is the only thing people are looking for.
What is the difference between a hero, a country hero, and a terrorist? Let me give you an example that is far away from you and from me. Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was jailed almost 30 years because he was declared as a terrorist. Was he a terrorist? Was he a liberator? Do terrorists become liberator and heroes only when the numinous or the regime is overthrown? Because it's very interesting, you know, Nelson Mandela is a hero. But Arafat was a terrorist considered by the Israeli and by many others, for example.
Well, you know, this is our life situation. I don't want to be too much in my persona, which, you know, everyone is okay. No, terrorists are terrorists for me. I cannot say other thing. Although, you know, what you say, of course it reached me very much, but I don't want to look too beautiful. I want my family and my people to be alive.
And I thank you for this, because it connects what you said before about Ukraine, you know, like making a point where there is an endless conversation. I would like to have James Hillman joining us. He wrote in a book titled "The Terrible Love for War." There is no practical solution to war, because war is not a problem solvable by the practical mind, which is better equipped for its conduct than for its avoidance or conclusion. War belongs to our soul as an archetypal truth of the cosmos. It is a human work and an inhuman horror, and a love that no other love has been able to overcome. We can open our eyes to this terrible truth and, becoming aware of it, devote all our passionate intensity to undermining the enactment of war, strengthened by the courage that culture possesses, even in the dark ages, to continue to sing as it resists war. We can understand it better, postpone it longer, work to gradually remove it from the support of a hypocritical religion, but the war as such will remain until the gods themselves leave.
Well, I will answer you by looking at the new ethic and depth psychology of Erich Neumann. And that's a strong answer to what James Hillman said, a little bit different. That sometimes you need to participate in evil, because this is a voice of the self. You know it in a personal level, every one of us know it in a personal level. And sometimes there are days like this in a nation life that you need to participate in evil, because you know this is a voice of yourself, of the self.
When the pandemic started 2 years ago, I started a series of conversation, as I mentioned before, called Lockdown Therapy, where with many different authoritative Jungians, we looked into what was happening live. we hoped, I hoped that that could be an opportunity to decelerate, to reflect and realize that nature intended for us to move from the external world to the internal world, and maybe to bring back, to regain an inner outer balance. And I hope that post-COVID, we could move from a world based on hopes and expectation, which are ego, the hopes and expectation of a linear world, to one where interiority and spirituality are once again contemplated. So also a world where there is a creativity of the soul. I wonder whether I was naive, and whether Michel Houellebecq, the French writer, was right when he said the world will be the same after the pandemic, only a little worse. Was I naive? Was he right?
You were naive. We all were naive because we all thought that the pandemic will change everything, especially the solidarity.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen.
But there was solidarity, at least at the beginning, right?
At the beginning. You know, I think we have a lesson to learn here, a deep one, that we Jungian put too much on individuation, and we need to put much more on solidarity, much more. That was a tiring conversation.
I thank you, and I think you're right. Solidarity as a co-construction of meaning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano. I hope to see you face to face.
I hope to.
In Buenos Aires, or
possibly Buenos Aires in summer.
That would be wonderful. Thank you very much for what you are doing.
Thank you. Bye-bye.